Well, this is Hoya. I built Hoya in 1998, 1999, and it was with a group of work at the same time. The 16 foot long piece in the front room. It's like a tapering Madame X. And what got me into this body of work was I was reading physics and reading about the wave patterns. And Tom Jenkins, but really what started it was Tom Jenkins. When I first got to UC Irvine, he goes, "Eric, I want you to forget about all the art you've ever made, and I want you to start from the beginning. I want you to start all over again, just like you're a child. And I want you to start drawing squares and boxes." So I did for about a year. This was in the early 80s. For about a year and a half, I made boxes and squares, and then I started making, I guess one night I just got frustrated about doing that, and it was really good. It was about waiting to make your next move. So I started making constructions, buildings and high rises. There's one up there, and they were blocks and squares stacked on each other. And then in the later 80s, I was reading string theory and Schrodinger's cat and all of that stuff, and I got this epiphany about introducing a random wave pattern to a group of squares that's on an axis central point, and they would be different. Some of them would start in harmony and end in chaos. Jim Cameron owns the biggest one of those. It's 13 feet long. But when I got to this piece, Hoya, I really wanted to have it, in Hoya's translation, American India is moving and creeping along the ground. And that's what this does. It's a floor piece and it moves along the ground. I wanted to have that feeling of families from a boat builder, fishermen, Cree Indian, Scottish, Norwegian, all coastal people, except for the Cree, the Great Lakes. And I wanted to have that basket kind of feeling and the boat type of feeling. And plus, a really important element, because Tom wanted me to get in touch with my beginnings as an artist, as a culturally American kitsch artist. And what I did is I built model airplanes, a lot of model airplanes. And so this is the structures like the model airplanes, and then these are the bulkheads. And on this piece, I wanted there to have a point at each end where the waves went through to the other side. And you can see that in this piece, how it moves. Now, all of these sides are detachable. But another thing is like the body of work that I've done that are diamonds. It's like if you were to take a square out of this and you have that movement, it's how the movement goes in the work. And later, this work developed into the Madame X series, which I started in 1993, and I continue to this day. It's one of my favorite bodies of work that I do. I just can't leave it. And this is poplar wood, and each piece here is thinner in the middle than on each end. It's like an hourglass, cutting it and pushing it and putting it in place. And then this is laminated poplar to get a bend, a good bend in it. What I do is I put it in tubes of hot water, in ABS tubes, put it out on hot water and then put it in the sun and let them get really hot and pliable. And I put it together just like you would a stick model airplane. The bulkheads I had on a table, and I would build the structure. And the really nice thing about it is there are no formal drawings of the piece. In fact, all my work, there are no real drawings. I have a reasonable capability of seeing where the next part goes and the flow of it. And that's about it.
But you told me that you started doing this kind of work at the time when you were a painter.
Yes. After I graduated from UC Irvine in 1997, I went up to LA and restored a friend of mine's house on 5th and Olympic. While I was there, Tom Jenkins, who was the instructor that earlier inspired me, called me and he said, we have a job for you. We want you to run the sculpture lab and be our sculpture teacher. But we have one thing, you have to make your work here. Well, at that time I was a painter. I was a figurative painter, a lot of figures, very narrative, teacups, different objects. And so I went back to UC Irvine. I agreed to take that position, but you can't paint in a sculpture room. It's just too full of sawdust. It's so much noise and everything. And painting is almost 80% cerebral. You sit and you stare at a painting for a long time. So I started pulling the narrative objects off of the canvas and making them three-dimensional. Like the teacup was a kind of a symbol for myself, la placa, if you please. And I made a huge teacup. It's 36 inches in diameter, and I think it's 36 inches tall. I used all scraps from Tony DeLapp because I was his studio assistant for many years, and I would take the scraps home every night that he allowed me to take, and I glued it together. It took a year to glue together the teacup, and one day to take a chainsaw and carve it all out. It's a interesting piece. So I think that answered your question.
Mm-hmm. And is that where you met John Paul Jones?
John Paul Jones was there when I first got back to UC Irvine. No, it's before I left. John Paul, I worked with him twice. Tony DeLapp went north like he did every summer, and John Paul Jones had me working with him, and that was quite nerve-wracking because John Paul was the absolute master craftsman, wood perfectionist. And one day he just handed me a piece and he goes, cut a quarter of this painting off. Because he called the wood pieces were wall pieces, they were paintings, and I was really nervous. So I made a lot of marks and cut it. I cut it perfectly, that was good. He was very good to learn from.